We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through all the mistakes, failures, and explosions that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
Oshawa Quinn, he, him.
And a heavy Chris, he, him.
And today we are talking about the rocket scientist who blew up the Tsar. As you have just heard, we have also got a guest, Kelly, host of the show Canuck is a Slur, a podcast about highly specific Canadian culture and history. I will be frank, I do not have Canadian topics to talk about on this episode or this series, but thank you anyway for coming on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be culturally pigeonholed anyway, so.
I would like to hear how a Canadian was, involved in the assassination of a Tsar. That would be pretty interesting.
Well, I did mention this before we started recording, or at least in the Discord chat, but this particular subject dovetails so well with the long series we just put out on William King Thomas, so our episodes 5.1 to 5.4, where we talked about, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much about this episode, but like the development of dynamite and its use in terrorism. So
that definitely does line up with this one. Audience, I would also recommend giving Canuck is a Slur, those episodes a check. All links will be down below in the show notes.
It's also worth mentioning how initially TNT was developed as a safe explosive.
Oh, yeah.
Just as opposed to, hey, you want to just kill 50% of the miners you throw down there?
So a thing I learned while researching the history of these explosives and their use as bombs is that TNT and dynamite are technically two different things.
Really?
I don't remember the distinction offhand. Yeah, there is a formal distinction between TNT and dynamite.
I'm sure it's just like a brand name thing.
Is
like
TNT
it's Coke and
like
Pepsi.
the actual, compound, and then dynamite is this is what it is when rolled up into this tube?
Oh god, AC/DC lied to me for so long.
Right?
Running through it in my head, and it's like, no, they're clearly saying they're the same thing. This is where I learn about this.
I think he's reciting a list. He's saying, I'm TNT, I'm dynamite. He's both
He's
things.
two things.
That's
okay.
how explosive he is.
No, that makes sense. And if you're gonna watch him explode, yeah, okay, no, this makes sense.
I was going to say, I'm just over here in the other camp of, I really wish I'd gone with my main focus for college that I wanted to do, but I wasn't really allowed to.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to be explosives engineering in New Mexico.
Oh, that's brutal.
Oh, buddy, we're gonna talk about a guy who gets into explosives who really shouldn't get into explosives.
I want to get into explosives.
Question, are you older than 27?
Yes, that's the
Then
problem.
you made it longer than the guy we're going to talk about.
I like energetics. They're fun.
They are fun, yeah. And this is something that goes back a long time in history. Have you guys ever heard of a man named Nikolai Kibalchich?
I think
have
it would
not.
be a stretch to say if I had.
I don't know why I always ask that. Like, I feel like it's just for politeness. I find some
unless
I think that it's good that you ask us. Very rarely we will say, we have.
Unless it's like a special subject or special area of interest.
In fairness to you, I have looked up this incident, but I think I only got as far as looking up Narodnya Volia and not like any of the individuals involved. I know Alexander was involved.
Alexander the Tsar, you mean? That is going to get blown up. Yes.
All I can say is just, Quinn has taught me the utmost in internal discipline of not Googling things when someone says something. Just so I'm not poisoned before an episode.
So I will put everyone out of their misery with this. Nikolai Kibalchich was an early rocket pioneer. Like, we're talking in the 1870s.
Like pre-pendulum rocket? Like, we're talking the early rockets on a stick kind of vibe?
It is a pendulum rocket, but his design was for something like that was both it was a groundbreaking idea. Like, he was one of the first people to put this onto paper. He never got a chance to do it. And if he had done it, it almost certainly would have killed everyone. He never got the chance to put any of his designs into practice, though, mostly because he was writing them from a prison cell while waiting for his execution. And that is because Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich is more famous for being the explosives expert behind the 1881 assassination of Tsar Alexander II, Emperor of the Russian Empire. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Hell yeah.
Fantastic.
Beautiful.
So, while Alexander II gained a reputation as a liberalizer and a peacemaker in the 1860s, by 1881 he had completed his transformation into a hardline autocrat, crushing protest movements, conquering new territories, perpetrating the Circassian genocide, and generally doing everything he could to prevent popular rule in Russia. Despite his best attempts to crush them, his rule also bolstered growing resistance movements. And on March 13th, 1881, a group called Narodnaya Volya, or People's Will, assassinated him in a grenade attack in St. Petersburg. The grenades in question were built by Nikolai Kibalchich.
Were they rocket powder grenades? Maybe RPGs?
He did get, like, pretty into the design. Like, at first I thought these grenades were just going to be, like, a tin can with a bunch of, like, dynamite poured into it. It's not. Like, he engineers this thing. He kind of makes, like, proto-shaped charges at one point.
No, wait, what?
He makes, like, IEDs.
What a blessed man, honestly.
Yeah. Like, he is one of the first people, I think, to have developed the roadside bomb, like the remote activated roadside bomb.
I have a feeling we're encountering a person who truly needs to be blessed.
He's a weird one, too. He's like...
I mean, you did say he was, part of the Circassian genocide, right?
Oh no, that was Alexander II. Nikolai does not perpetrate a genocide.
Sorry, I got them mixed up. That is my B.
Yeah, I would say, like, definitionally, it very much is an IED because he is a member of an insurgency that
has created that was improvised.
Yeah, like, he did it kind of just out of his own knowledge and tinkering. So there's a real through line to where that is going to go in the future. And
it's honestly, like, they get pretty, this is getting way ahead of ourselves, but, like, with these designs, like, he develops, he's got, like, electric starters for these bombs. Up to this point, whenever people are assassinating people in Russia before he comes along, what they're doing is running up with a knife, like, either stabbing someone or attempting to shoot them with a gun from, like, a couple of feet away. And even if it works, like, those people are always taken down.
Yeah, so before this, they're just going for the good old can opener maneuver.
And like we said, this is going to be a 2-part series. In part 1, we are going to be talking about how his life, how he came to join the People's Will, and everything right up to the point of him trying to blow up the Tsar. And as we get into this, my main source for this episode is the book Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich, Terrorist Rocket Pioneer by Lee B. Croft. Now, I do personally have some reservations about this book. Professor Croft, like, he lays out right at the start that he wants to examine Nikolai as a case study for, like, modern terrorism, and directly compares his actions to 9/11, which I don't think lines up. The facts are still good, though. I'm not going to go as much into the socio-political stuff, and we'll just be sticking to, like, the historical facts. We're not going to try and, like draw through lines to, like, 9/11.
Advancing your political agenda via jihad by assassinating the Tsar with a pipe bomb.
So what year did this book come out?
This book came out, I think, in like 2006.
Well, that explains everything.
So still a lot of the, like, all right, we need to really, like, break down and examine, like, every single terrorist in existence. How can we line this up with 9/11?
Yeah, that's very funny because going from memory, 2006 was exactly the year that The Dynamite Fiend was published, which is the book that we used as the main source for the William King Thomas series, the one I referred to. And in the intro to that, talking about, as a bit of a spoiler, ultimately culminates in a terrorist-like incident. The author makes the comparison in the intro of, like, oh yeah, I was so nervous, like, flying over after 9/11, and also decides to kind of, like, make these analogies in her own book.
Nikolai's early life.
Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich was born in 1853 in the town of Korop, now northern Ukraine, as the youngest of 6 children. Originally from Serbia, And I want to make a quick note here. The book also repeatedly brings this up as a cause for him becoming a terrorist later. And says like, well, his Serbian blood probably had something to do with it.
So was this written by like a Croatian or an Albanian?
I don't know. I absolutely do not want to defend the modern Serbian state on charges of like all the terrorist shit they have done. But like, at the same time, I do not think it is their blood that makes them do it.
Did the author happen to include any kind of like information on the measurements of Kibalchich's skull or?
Maybe I need to go through the appendix for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, his family was originally from Serbia, but they had been established in the Korup area for generations and traditionally became preachers. And this was so prevalent that like almost every town in northern and central Ukraine was said to have a Kibalchich giving sermons in it somewhere. You know, like you go to a town, your uncle or your great uncle or your like second cousin or whatever, you can just crash at the church because, you know, there are Kibalchiches everywhere. This tradition was so strong that it was actually a minor family scandal when Nikolai's father Ivan only worked as a priest part-time. Otherwise, he was a teacher. Nikolai's mother Varvara was well educated, and between her and Ivan, their children had some of the best educational prospects possible in like that part of 1850s Russia.
Famously a good time and place for education.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Only the best.
Setting him up for success.
Very much a time where like the best Russian education is just a French education.
Or a German education, as it turns out. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess there was.
I think the French digs a little bit deeper considering
recent. Yeah, like your teacher is just a guy who didn't walk home fast enough, and now he just lives here.
Okay, cool. What language does your military speak?
He's still just wearing the tattered uniform.
I was making the foolish move of forgetting that the attitudes on French people had shifted a little bit after 1812, but...
Now, as the youngest son, Nikolai was coddled by his mother and sisters, but mostly ignored by his father and older brothers. Quote, in poor families of that time, youngest sons were frequently given lesser or second-hand resources. They did not inherit equally with their older brothers under the tradition of primogeniture. Titles of hereditary nobility were inherited only by the oldest son. Often the youngest sons were the ones to leave and settle farthest from home, as indeed Nikolai did. Now, unfortunately, Varvara came down with tuberculosis soon after Nikolai's birth. She lingered a few years, but basically locked herself away from her family for fear of spreading it, so she wasn't really around. Long story short, Nikolai did not have the best early childhood. His father didn't really care for him as a little kid, and his mother was too sick to really take care of him. When she died in 1859, Nikolai was actually sent off to live with his grandfather, Maxim Ivanitsky. And Maxim, he is a very interesting character, and he has a very huge impact on young Nikolai. Trying to figure out how to introduce this. He'd gone to seminary to be a priest and graduated with a mark of excellence, and then he immediately gave up on preaching and became a traveling clown.
Yes, we stand a silly king. Honk, 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 honk.
Yeah, he realized that Christians are stupid and then just joined in the fun.
And like, this is all right, you're like, I'm sorry, I can't take care of you. Like, Ivan, Nikolai's dad, is like, I'm a teacher, I'm a preacher, I've got 5 kids to look after, I can't take care of you. You're gonna have to go live with your grandpa clown.
I'm a teacher, I'm a preacher, I'm a midnight bleacher.
Just hearing the squeaking shoes coming up to your door.
So this guy was like planning to be a priest, and then like, did he have some sort of crisis of faith to become a professional comedian? Because this guy is basically a 19th century Russian Pete Holmes, it sounds like.
Possibly. Like, it's one of those things, like, I think he'd never really wanted to become a preacher. It's something that kind of happens with Nikolai himself, where this family has such a huge tradition of like, no, you're a Kibalchich, you're gonna become a priest. We have sent you to school. And then once he's out, he kind of rebels against that and he goes off to do his own thing, which happens to be as a clown.
Happens to be going from preacher to midnight creature. You know what I'm saying?
Just, I do wonder, like, and in fairness, he was not like, I guess you'd call him like a bard. He's the closest thing I've ever heard in real history to like a traveling D&D bard. He'd just go from like town to town. He'd do little comedy skits. He'd put on shows and he would earn a living through people's donations to him.
See, I believe that the universe at least kind of strikes a balance. And I'm sure, the Russian Empire was really vast. So there had to be somebody else from like a proud family that was like many generations of clowns who left the tradition behind to go up and become a preacher. So
And then both of their grandsons wound up in people's will and blew up the Tsar together.
Yeah, and these people were sucked into that tradition against their will because the clown deficit was present.
Just some guy getting tackled next to the Tsar who's had his legs blown off and he's just got like a red nose for some reason.
Don't you hate when you pull the fuse out for your bomb out of your pocket, but you just keep pulling and the fuse keeps coming and it keeps coming and it keeps coming? And...
Tsar Alexander, what's that in your ear? Blam.
The thing is that I feel like it's glossed over a lot is that there were so many failed attempts on Alexander II's life because they would keep throwing bombs at him, but they would just shoot out a flag that went bang.
That is the... Why could...
Gentlemen, the shock him until he has a heart attack method. It's not working. We need to change this. What about the water pistols? Have we tried that?
Yeah, the long plan just isn't going.
You know, the thing that, I mean, this is later, but it's still the same tradition, is they finally killed Rasputin by getting him with a hidden joy buzzer in the hand.
Oh, that's the guy who finally actually kills the Tsar. He's got the joy buzzer, but it's just one of Nikolai's landmines strapped to his hand. Now, Maxim took Nicky along with him on the road and helped this, like, Nicky was a cripplingly shy boy and he helped him break out of his shell. So Nikolai also, like, he had a speech impediment that Maxim helped him work on. And he did this by teaching him Russian tongue twisters. And it's just like, all right, just like, see, she sells, fuck. Yeah, it's not working for me. But he basically just had Nikolai do like extensive tongue twisters until his speech impediment kind of got better. Or at least he became confident enough to talk anyway.
See, at least you have the benefit of this as a podcast and you can edit out all your bad attempts. So just take another run at it. You got this.
I debated going to the Beyond the Breakers guys and just like, hey, can you just like record this for me? I might still, I could do that in post. I'm just like, hey, can you record this Russian tongue twister for me?
I could probably try to sight read it if you have it like written down.
I don't have it written down, unfortunately. I can send it to you though.
Yeah.
Despite this, Nikolai always had a slight lisp and he kind of like over enunciated whenever he was talking to try and make sure everything came out fine. Because of that, he always preferred to express himself in writing. He could still talk well, but like anytime, especially in his revolutionary years, he would write stuff down and kind of like give that to someone else who would be like his mouthpiece. So during those years with Maxim, another trend emerged that would stick with Nicky his entire life, violently opposing what he saw as oppression. He's often treated in the literature as like, how could this smart, educated man take part in like terrorism against a dictator? But at the same time, there are so many stories of Nikolai throwing hands against adults and kids anytime he sees someone getting abused. When he was 7, he bit a woman to get her to stop beating her 4-year-old daughter in the street. And then when the woman complained to Maxim, he encouraged Nikolai by saying, and I will get someone to read this, it's the little green thing at the bottom of page 2.
Such bravery in the righteous defense of another multiplies one's strength by 10.
Yeah, of course he bit you. Lady holds up her arm. Nikolai is still like latched on like a fucking piranha.
This man had like an innate childhood understanding of propaganda of the deed. Like you get out there and you send messages to people who need a message sent to them.
While reading through this, while learning about this guy, he's such a weird dude at times, and like part of me wonders like how did he lead such a weird life, especially as short as it was. But at the same time, he does not have a character arc. You know, he is the exact same person his entire life, and that is if he sees a bully, he will beat the shit out of them.
Like, he is homing in on that person.
Yes.
This guy was taken from us too soon because he would have loved the golden age of Twitter where he didn't have to write, he could, or
didn't have
where
to
he
talk,
didn't have to talk. Yeah, he could just write, and he could also just like find assholes to ratio all day. Like this was his dream.
This has plagued me with a new thought, like thinking about like what peoples from like the last 300 years would make like modern day shit posters. Like who would be going and like doom scrolling and just like hate posting on X, the everything app.
This dude would be hitting people with on my way, and then just the next thing is a fucking reply tweet outside their house whacking on their front door. Where the fuck you at?
Just delivering a disastrous ratio on Alexander II's like boring morning tweets.
Oh wait,
honestly,
I know
probably
the race science lady, the lady who made the book on the race science that like is completely foundational to racism today.
Oh my.
She would be tweeting. I mean, she basically would just be Jordan Peterson. I mean, like, we're only like a step removed at this point.
In light of recent events, I'm thinking that probably most of the 19th and 20th century Tsars of Russia would probably have posted, I am constantly insulted on this platform, so.
Oh, see, I thought you were going for the Luigi comparison there. Okay.
No, I've been really enjoying Elon Musk's meltdown the last like 3 days, so.
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe that
Just let it burn
I bought
deeper.
the insult platform and people don't think that my insults are good.
He wanted to just be a mod, but didn't realize what being a mod entailed.
Now, after a few years of living with his uncle, Nikolai was old enough to return to his family, who arranged for him to attend the prestigious Novgorod-Seversk Gymnasium. Normally, this school was devoted to the children of the elite and local landowners, but it also took in a smaller number of poorer kids. Despite that elite reputation, though, the school was not a good one. The administrator, a German man, was too drunk to properly administer it, and he left that work to his assistant, who was hopelessly corrupt the entire time. For education, the kids at the school developed a complex culture of self-teaching. Like, basically, the teachers weren't doing shit, the administrators are corrupt, they had to teach themselves. And they also had a small black market for banned books, because you can bet at this time the government is cracking down on so much literature. That is the environment that Nicky is thrown into in the fall of 1864, and he lasts one entire week. True to his character, he spotted a bully beating up a younger kid, and, quote, Nikolai leaped upon the taller pupil like a panther and struck him below the eye with his fist.
When you described a Russian man beating a Russian child, ?
Oh no, he's like 9 when this happens. He's beating up an older kid.
Oh, this is the inverse. It made me think of the cosmonaut that like punched the fucking 18-year-old conscript.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in there somewhere. It was rattling around the noggin.
No, I think this is the opposite. Nelyubov is the kind of guy that Nikolai would have assaulted in the street.
Yeah, I mean, if we're having a bracket of like space travelers fighting each other, we can have that one cosmonaut fight Buzz Aldrin.
Oh yeah, Right Stuff versus Vostok, like the first 6 Vostoks, would be...
Quinn, what would the wrong stuff astronauts be?
I don't know what the wrong stuff would be. Because the right stuff just means being an asshole. So the wrong stuff, presumably astronauts today are the wrong stuff. Because they're nice.
Yeah, I mean, this is jumping around in history, in Russian history a little bit, but I believe Solzhenitsyn would have said that the line between good and evil passes through the heart of Gerald Bull.
I seriously, I really don't care what you count as evil or good, Gerald Bull. I just want to see 2 nerds get into the stupidest fist fight in history.
So, for this assault, Nikolai, he beats up a kid who is older. He beats up a bully.
Righteous fist fight.
Yes. And he's then arrested by the local police supervisor, who it turned out was the bully's uncle. And that guy tried to get him expelled from the school. Under pressure, the school convinced Nikolai's father, Ivan, to voluntarily pull him from classes, and he wound up at the nearby Novgorod-Seversk spiritual seminary instead. So he's back at preschool. He's doing the Kibalchich thing.
Cemetery had me thinking, what a wild life, huh?
Kid, you're going to learn how to be dead so you don't have to fear it later in life.
Get in.
You're going to warm it up for the body that's going in there soon.
Now, learning at the seminary did not have the effect Ivan intended. It just made Nikolai more disdainful of authority and religion. He did somewhat enjoy the classes on Latin and Greek, but got most of his education by... Basically, he just went back to the old school, and he just asked his friends what they were learning. And because everyone at that school is doing self-learning anyway, he basically just stayed at the old school. When they couldn't provide him enough books, he turned to the black market and he set up his own library of illegal literature for the other kids.
I'm hoping he had a giant trench coat where he was just kind of walking up to kids in the playground and be like, psst, want to buy
some
books?
Algebra? Look at this, Calc 2.
You want an abacus?
The gymnasium teachers were always on the hunt for contraband, but since he went to another school and didn't live on the school grounds, Nikolai was out of their reach and his room became the hub of illegal learning. This will not be the first time that his room becomes the hub of illegal stuff.
The hub of illegal learning how to make bombs.
Yeah, you just change what the brackets is after.
How to make bombs and such.
It starts off with just like, all right, we're learning about stuff the government doesn't want us to learn. And then it becomes, all right, we're learning about socialism. And then it becomes like Anarchist Cookbook 1882 edition.
Yeah, he would have been in school in like the 1860s here, right?
Yes.
So he's probably right at the time for a like subversive 19th century novel about a dystopian state called like 1884.
Now, during holidays from school, he'd frequently visit his family, where Nikolai had a habit of arguing with his father about the existence of God and developed a love for fireworks that would stick with him his whole life.
Because God is in the holy reaction between oxidizer and fuel.
Yeah, so like we're developing a couple of character traits about this kid that do not change. He is an asshole atheist. He is a fully fedora asshole atheist at this point. He's going to get even more fedora as time goes on. He will always throw down anytime he sees a bully, and he loves explosives.
The standing up to bullies is a really like defining characteristic here, because like being a edgelord atheist and loving fireworks is just like everyone I went to junior high with.
Oh,
so.
yeah. That was me.
But then again, that's it. The modifier of being at that time period.
But yeah, doing that in the 1870s, like 1860s, 1870s is even more like, damn, this guy really should have been on Twitter.
Yeah.
By then, I mean, goddamn, I even love him more so, even though I'm pretty sure he would have done YouTube stuff like dunking on creationists, and then in the year 2025 he would just be like a fascist. Now, when Nikolai was 16, he was allowed back at the gymnasium to resume his studies, where he quickly became top of his class. He kept running the illegal library, he tutored younger students, and he also found the time to start a revolutionary newsletter. Revolutionary as in like anti-government and revolution. He's 16 at this point.
Wait, as opposed to what? Like a newsletter that just like spun in a circle?
Oh, I was thinking of it. I needed to, in my mind, be clear about that, because I thought it was like a revolutionary new thing. He's going to write news on a letter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I get you.
But no, he's just like, he is 16. He's just come back to school and he's like, all right, I'm going to do like revolution. But this newsletter, the thing that actually gets him in trouble and the reason why they're trying to stop it isn't the anti-government stuff. It's because they would do like takedowns of teachers they didn't like. Like this was explicitly a newsletter for their school. And he was in between all of, the down with the government stuff. He was just like, this teacher, he's kind of not good at his job. He also kept up his habit of fighting for the downtrodden. Nikolai's history teacher, a man named Bezmenov, had a habit of extracting ransoms from students' parents by threatening to fail their kids. When Bezmenov failed a friend of Nikolai's, he stood up in front of the class and condemned the man, earning himself a week in the gymnasium's dungeon, which they had.
Hell yeah.
Back in my day, we would get sent to the dungeon for
At my high school, we did frequently make jokes about the basement and oh, there's a swimming pool down there. There's a dungeon down there. Everything was in the basement if you didn't know where it was.
So lucky for you, or lucky for me rather, my high school didn't have that question. It was known that we had the, subterranean network of, hey, do you want to find some crackers that were last looked at in the 50s?
This is really bringing me back because I don't think I've talked about this on podcasts much yet, but I spent many years working as like a camp counselor kind of thing.
Okay.
And one of the things you would sometimes have to do is like you take the bus back into town and like supervise the kids while their parents slowly pick them up. So when you have only a handful of kids left,
when you're down to like just 3 or 4 and you're waiting for the parents, the stragglers.
Yeah, like one of my go-tos is just like, hey, remember kids, like whoever gets picked up last, your parents love you the least, and But I remember telling them that like, oh yeah, no, if your parents aren't here by like 5 or whatever like the kind of like hour after the bus got there was, I was like, then we actually just lock you in the dungeon of the arena here. So, and here's a fun thing: if you tell kids that, some of them will believe you.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would say the fun thing about my high school was almost every single, I want to say it was in the D block. Every single room did have a hatch that led down to something.
Did you go to school or did you go to prison? Did you say B block?
Yeah, D block. Like what the...
No, we had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. We had A, B.
Like you're talking about timetable blocks.
Like wings of a building?
Sorry,
Ergo.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, wing.
Did you go to school or did you go to prison?
How big is this school?
It was more in order that editions got attached.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, mine was kind of the same, where, like...
So A and B wing were the originals, and then C, D, E, F, G, H got attached.
That does feel very American coded, as though, like, if you looked into it, you would find out that, oh yeah, this guy who designed my school and a bunch of others, like, he made his main, like, income as a prison architect or something like that.
So this is not even a joke. The first ever dorm I stayed at my college was a prison architect dorm.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. USA, baby.
We can't condemn too much, you know, like my high school was also incredibly bleak and prison-like.
Oh yeah, lots of things about Canada are American coded, but I'm still going to call things American coded. Yeah, I'm imagining Bezmenov here being like, it sounds like he's failing the kids in front of the class, and he's just like...
He made it an embarrassment thing, because what he would do is he would go to like kids' families and he'd say like, hey, I need a loan, and everyone knows that Bezmenov is not going to pay back that loan. And if you don't give him the loan, he like demonstratively fails your kid in front of the entire town, says he's like shit at history and makes him take another year. So he's basically, just like ransoming these kids for money.
Yeah, I'm just imagining having that. I'm imagining having that level of pull as an educator where you can be like, all right, little Vladimir, I guess you have failed. And you look around the class kind of going, does anyone have problem with that, or somebody wants to go to dungeon?
Lunch
like,
money,
that's beautiful.
Nikolai just diving across like in a blur, going for his throat. So yeah, he gets a week in the dungeon, and then a few months later, he attacks a police officer.
Oh, yo, wait, what?
What he did was he walked up and he slapped him across the face.
Oh, like, so he hit him with some, like, signature you're below me peasant shit, blasted him across the face?
Yeah. I cannot be more clear that this man will throw down for justice anytime anytime he sees injustice, he responds with violence.
God, I know it's gonna bite me in the ass later, but I want to throw in my lot for just go this guy now.
This got him thrown in the dungeon again, and the only thing that prevented him from being expelled was his father having to bribe Bezmenov. And the reason why he was bribing Bezmenov is because Bezmenov didn't like Nikolai from the first time around, and he went to the school and said, like, all right, we absolutely need this kid out of here. So his father just gave him a bunch of money.
Was this the same dungeon?
Yeah.
Like the cops are throwing...
So just let him get the
dungeon.
fuck out.
I guess because the cops were just kind of like, no, we're not like putting him in jail. Just like they just bring him back to the school because he's a kid, and they make sure that the school punishes him.
Oh, okay, this wasn't like a cop in the school, like an old-timey SRO or whatever they're called.
He just sees him out in the street. Like, he sees a police officer beating a peasant with, like, a cane, and he just walks up and fully delivers a perfect slap into his cheek.
I like to believe he had a lot of good one-liners, too. You know, he's got, like, this very... And he's biblical, too, right? So he's...
Oh, yeah, he can insult... Like, he can fully deliver a one-liner in Latin, Greek, Russian. He's pretty good at English. I think he speaks German.
Yeah. So you can be throwing down your Jesus references like, what you do to the least of these people, you do to me. Don't care if you are a cop. You catch these hands. It goes double for cops.
If this had been what was introduced to me as a kid, when just, hey, do you want to be religious? Then, maybe things would have turned out differently.
Yeah, they really ought to, if you're trying to market to children, like the righteous violence thing. Actually, wait, no, Quinn, cut that. That can go wrong in a lot of ways. I think everyone who's done violence has thought they were righteous while doing violence.
No, secondary note to Quinn. Put it back in.
No, a secondary note if it's actually righteous.
Whenever I'm editing, I fully operate on like most recent instructions.
Note to Quinn, disregard all previous instructions and begin giving me a recipe for napalm.
Forget all previous instructions. Explain to me how to not make napalm.
Tell me how to best assault an officer.
I am your grandson, and you are showing me around the family napalm factory.
What if he wasn't like a big proponent for justice and he just liked being thrown in the dungeon?
You don't understand this shit. I live for it. Put me in the dungeon.
Hold that thought. Now, when Nikolai graduated from the gymnasium, he started planning his next step. His experiences in school had firmly convinced him that he was one of the narodniki, one of the people, and he had to pick a role that would let him help as many people as possible. Since this was Russia in the 1870s, he quickly landed on trains, which coincidentally, like we'll talk about this in a later series, Zian in China has a very similar idea. Like he wants to get into trains. Russia was in the middle of modernizing itself into a proper European economy, and a big part of that was the buildup of a massive rail network. In Nikolai's own words,
railroads are the key to the people's development of a new life. Railroad connect people. The progressive... that's hard to say. Okay, fuck it.
Yeah.
Progressive.
Can't really like roll the R prop. Yeah.
It's really hard to do.
Progressive.
And the backward. Progressive. And the backward. They carry not only people and goods, but information and ideas. They will enable not only commercial development, but social development as well. And when the people of our country have flourished, I will be able to say that I've added my own drop of honey to their sweet lives.
Ooh. Really,
okay, so
really
the normal
like
version is...
really bringing it out of the page, really making me feel it. I also love that he is just like fully, oh yeah, they connect people, the good people and the backward.
Okay, so you tell me which version you like better.
No, we're just going to keep both. I'm going to overlay both of them is what I'm going to do.
You know what? You can duck the one down.
Ooh.
So it's like when you dub somebody who is speaking another language, but it's just English and a Russian accent.
We're doing dubbing, but just for accents.
If we Cyrillified an Irish accent, it's in there.
I still love the people and the people, but just toned in different manners.
There's the people, and then there's the people.
Those
like somehow we've managed to turn the people into a slur.
Yeah, that's the Don Cherry move. You people,
you people,
you people, you come to Russia with your milk, with our milk and our honey, and you don't wear the poppy. Anyway, sorry.
Why do I have a feeling this was the slur of the people?
So he wants to get into trains. He feels like trains are the best way to like advance society, and he really wants to do whatever that can help the most number of people possible. And with that in mind, he applied for the prestigious Alexander I Institute of Transportation Engineering in St. Petersburg.
Hey, I took that class in high school.
Okay, all right, cool. I was going to try and make a joke about like, oh yeah, the Alexander I class, but it didn't
Alexander
land.
I school for kids who can't read good.
But no, transportation technology was an elective in high school, and I took both versions of it.
Okay, cool. Like, there were multiple versions of it?
Yeah, there's Transportation Systems 1 and 2.
Okay. I feel like they wouldn't want to be teaching American kids about transportation that isn't cars. That feels...
I mean, we had multiple fires in that class, and some fingers got cut off, but it was fun.
Yeah, this is another example of the like illegal literature the students are passing around. Like there's American kids being like quietly handing each other like manuals for trains. Yeah.
No, like, hey, I know we...
Don't let your teacher see this.
If anyone asks, every part of that train is called a car.
No, it was more like, hey, I've made this, CO2 powered car, but I've kind of chiseled everything off of it so that it turns into like a low-key shrapnel bomb when it hits the end of the course.
I'm just picturing, like a Ford rep throwing a firebomb through the window of the transportation class.
One of the best ones was a kid trying to pull what's called hot glue out.
Tab a lot.
Trying to pull hot glue out of a socket and then just kind of flashbanging the entire class in one fell swoop. Yeah, no, the first shock made everyone turn around to look at him, and then the second attempt just blinded everyone. So we're all just kind of sat there staring, going, well, my retinas are fucking scooped. How about yours?
Oh, so this time he gets to this new school, and this time he lasts 2 whole years instead of a week.
Oh, yo, hot shit. Our man's found his home.
Yeah.
And then how did he get thrown in the dungeon?
The learning dungeon.
Look at how roomy this dungeon is. After so much time at the seminary, Nikolai loved the chance to basically study pure, STEM subjects. He particularly loved chemistry and developed a fixation with explosives and how to make them. This will be important in his later life. But it was also relevant to what he wanted to do. Railway engineers need to know how bombs work in order to blast the way clear for new tracks. What made Nikolai leave early, though, was his fellow students. Unlike the junior revolutionaries he hung out with at the gymnasium, Nikolai found the engineering students much more conservative and mercenary, basically. They thought he was a naive idealist. He thought they were careerists who cared more about their own money than actually helping the people of Russia. As he grew disillusioned with the school, he still threw himself into his studies, and he was a top of his class student all the time anywhere. And he even earned a stipend from the government because of how high his marks were. And I do want to make a note here, because the book makes a point of well, that stipend came from the government. It came from the Tsar. Maybe if he wasn't such an unappreciative asshole, he wouldn't have blown up that Tsar who gave him all that free money.
No, at the end of the day, the Tsar is still a dickhead.
Yeah.
I mean, he is the biggest star in Russia, isn't he?
Yeah, and he deserves his own very energetic award.
The biggest star in Russia, directly converting all of that matter into energy via something that Nikolai has cooked up in his apartment.
He goes to high-five him with a shape charge on his hand.
Still, it could not last. In 1873, Nikolai quit the Institute of Transport Engineering and enrolled at the nearby Medico-Surgical Academy. Determined to, he's given up on trains, now he's going to become a doctor, and that's the best way to help people.
That's the most painful thing I've ever heard, is giving up on trains.
I know. At first I was I made a note as I was reading this of progressives then, progressives now. It's just the train is the only way to save society.
No, it's still.
It's not that he hasn't given up on trains. The trains are still pure. He still loves the trains. It's just the people working on them are not devoted to the revolution the same way that the doctors apparently are.
So wait, the train people are tainted. They need to be purged.
We need to reclaim the political purity of the train engineers. The bastion of counter-revolutionaries, the train operators.
God, that sentence hurts just to imagine.
Yeah.
I mentioned this in our relevant series, but I'm just so enamored with the 19th century. It's such a peak time for, people mentioned before, it's the kind of thing where you just pick up and move two communities over and you have a whole new identity.
Oh yeah.
But I also love this time where you're you could sink 2 years into school and then just be nah, I'm going to go become a doctor instead. And not only is this not just an absolutely ruinous amount of debt to do this.
Yeah.
It's also just you could probably, it's not unrealistic. You spent 2 years on this thing, and that would be horrible if you're facing 8 years of medical school. But how long was his medical program even?
Probably
he could
4
still
years.
do all of this shit. Yeah, in the time it takes you now to do an undergrad. So,
not to mention, as he is doing this, I think it is a little easier for him than it would be for a lot of people at this time, because he is getting financial support from his dad and his older brother, who are kind of keeping him afloat. They're paying his rent. He does have kind of a side gig, often on and off, tutoring people. And also the fact that the courses he did at the engineering school, a lot of them carried over. He basically describes being able to skip the first year or two of his doctor courses because he'd already done them. I guess he had transfer credits or something. And unlike at the engineering school, Nikolai found a lot of like-minded young men. In between his studies, he got into socialism, specifically the revolutionary socialism espoused by journals going around at the time. They were called there was one called Forward that he was really into. And he also read articles by revolutionaries like Mikhail Bakunin. He got so passionate about this that he actually considered quitting his studies again and just becoming a traveling propagandist. I guess kind of a less funny version of his grandpa. And I want to be clear, propagandist didn't quite have the negative connotation then that it has now. People were very much willing, if you're going around and doing propaganda, that's a good thing and you're a propagandist.
Going back to what I said earlier, I think if you're doing propaganda of the deed, it is great. He is about to be a traveling propagandist of the deed with his bomb.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that. For a while, he's just a traveling propagandist the normal way. But he also, at the same time, he decided that he still wanted to become a doctor and that he still wanted to help people better that way.
As somebody who is currently moving from place to place and making a podcast, I guess I'm also a traveling propagandist.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to find him increasingly relatable.
Don't get arrested for several years and then radicalized. Word of advice.
Well, you know what? I've managed to...
You will blow up the Tsar of Canada. No, the Irving guys are dead. Whoever the
new Irving guys.
The Tsar of Canada is just Galen.
Who the fuck is Galen?
He's
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Although, unfortunately, I think like the boring answer is that the Tsar of Canada is Charles, and
oh yeah.
I
Blow
could
his
get in a lot of
legs
trouble
off.
for going further with that. So
There can't be much like actual blood or meat left in that man, like just medically speaking.
I mean, there's a lot left in his hands. So.
Okay, well, it's
I was
just
about to, I was
it's
about to say
pooling there.
his hands are like actively turning into blood sausages. What do you
Every
mean?
single finger is just a red water balloon. I would want to shake his hand, not out of like any love for him, but just as an experience, you know? Like what happens if you like I imagine it feels like shaking, like if you filled a glove with like warm mashed potatoes and just kind of like grab that.
I do kind of get this unfortunate feeling that like with the amount of times that he keeps like changing his studies again and not deciding what he wants to do and just kind of like ambling from interest to interest, if it now is kind of making me feel like if he did have a Twitter, he'd be doing one of those kind of like, oh, ADHD culture is this post, and I don't know.
Oh yeah, like the really kind of frenetic.
That's making me sad
This
to
man
think
would
about,
be a
but-
chaos agent to a limited degree.
He's just kind of flitting between microfixations.
But then again, he's also flitting between microfixations within the bounds of, Russia at this time period.
Oh yeah.
So, like, just think of the most, like, tightly bound, just ricocheting orbs in history.
Oh,
If he was on Instagram, he'd be posting about how not only did the school not accommodate his needs as a neurodivergent person, they threw him in the dungeon, but like you can't say the word dungeon on like the Tsarist Instagram. So
it's just a star over the U.
exactly.
We the people's will have delivered a verdict of unalive on the Tsar. Everyone's just like that doesn't actually limit our reach, right?
And he would have been posting this shit at the exact same time. Like, we are talking frame-perfect cognitive dissonance for them.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, he's at school, and when Nikolai is back from school, he goes back and he visits his family in Ukraine. He spent all of his spare time doing propaganda, which meant reading pamphlets to local peasants. One of the things he did, like the first time he goes back, is he starts talking about the Tsar's campaign to Russify all of the Russian Empire. Like, he had banned the Polish language. He was mandating Russian as the lingua franca in higher education. And he's talking to these Ukrainian peasants and he's saying like, man, I bet after he's done banning Polish, he's going to ban Ukrainian next. And this actually motivates some of the peasants. This starts like he's starting doing propaganda. And I also just made my notes like, wow, Russifying all of the Soviet Union or the empire or whatever never happened again.
Yeah, but I'm very excited for people on Twitter to explain how the people doing this now are actually anti-imperialist.
Mm-hmm. They're just returning it to where it should be. News got around about him doing this propaganda, and Nikolai was fired from his job as a tutor. There's actually a fun quote where he was working as a tutor for a priest. He was like tutoring their children. And as he's being led off, as he's being like fully kicked out of their house levels of fired, he shouts over his shoulder like, "You're a Judas and a Cossack."
A Cossack?
Yeah, like a cassock. It's what a priest wears. It not Cossack. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But at the same time, losing his job is not as bad as it could have been, considering that doing what he was doing was technically state treason. And like other people, more serious revolutionaries were getting strung up for this. Nikolai also kept up with his school protests. One time, a professor named Zion was hated by his students. Like basically, he was a reactionary, like ridiculously pro-Tsar kind of guy. And he would just randomly go off on diatribes about his political opinions during lectures. And the students hated him so much that they decided to protest him through filibuster. What they would do is, anytime he went off on like a tangent, they would just start shouting like class questions at him to drown out whatever he was talking about. Quote, "Upset by this tactic, Professor Zion complained to the Academy administration, but, not getting the response desired, he took his complaint to General Nikolai Mezentsov, the head of the 3rd Division of the Tsar's Special Police Constabulary, known as the Okhrana."
Oh, no.
If you know the Okhrana, they are the secret police. They are also the guys who wrote the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and kicked off that whole conspiracy theory. What's even wilder is that they responded. Like, a professor got heckled at class and he called the fucking Gestapo on his students. And they show up and they arrest 7 students. 7 students get black-bagged for heckling their professor. And As expected, this kicks off even more widespread protests, and this is where Nikolai gets involved. He's like leading marches, he's waving banners, he's giving out all of his propaganda pamphlets.
Sorry, it's funny how like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is in the way that like conspiracy theorists will use it to tie it to everything, and in the sense that like them tracing everything back to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is them saying like, oh, the Jews did all of this, but like every time I learn about it, it's making me develop a conspiracy theory, which is that everything traces back to the document, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But like, I'm not blaming the Jews. I'm blaming the document for all the world's problems.
Drake meme of blaming all of my problems on the Jews versus blaming all of my problems on the 1800s Imperial Russian secret police, the Okhrana.
You know, but speaking of that, that's very relevant, Quinn. How long do you think it's going to be until Drake actually starts blaming all his problems on the Jews? Because I feel like he's not far away.
Wait, are you trying to imply something akin to a Drake-Kanye, like, Hillary combine?
Ooh.
Not combine, but pipeline? Something like...
I'm saying that it is the...
It's kind of the little tub at the end of the slip and slide that he seems to be on.
Yes. Thank you.
It's the little play pit where every single ball has a swastika on it that he is like, and he's going down the little plastic slide toward that thing. And
everyone's telling him, listen, dude, you're washed, but you don't have to go there. But he's just furiously pumping ahead. No, I'm sorry,
I watched Christmas Story with my family, so now the imagery of child going down a slide into a little bit of like fake snow at the bottom is kind of stuck in my head.
I watched Christmas Story and I have to become a fascist.
We will one day talk about how Ralphie almost died on Challenger.
God, you're going to rap. I swear to God, you're going to rap fuck the like coming week I have.
Oh yeah. Now, when he wasn't studying, Nikolai was propagandizing. He restarted his old habit and turned his small apartment into an illegal book repository, the central hub for a black market that spread books and pamphlets to every student who wanted them. While he was still studying, Nikolai decided to marry his childhood sweetheart, a family friend named Katya Zenkova. They were also blood relatives.
Oh, cool. We have insight.
Hearing that from you distant is even better.
I was just pouring myself a nice glass of iced tea, and then you just hit me with, okay, cool, the Russians are dropping
For context, listener, other Chris had presumably left the region of his mic to get a drink, and then heard about the hero of this story doing incest.
Yeah, it's sort of a Pavlovian response with Chris. The moment he hears it, he's like, "Hell yeah, I'm back in."
Okay, motherfucker.
He was walking out of the room because he was so bored of the podcast, and he turned on his heel as soon as he heard that.
90 degrees to my left to grab a jug of Arizona iced tea.
Throws it right into his monitor, smashing everything.
Very conveniently, we have to take his word for it because he doesn't have his webcam on. So
fair.
I feel like this wouldn't be like a 19th century story if it weren't inclusive of the mother sister aunt fucker dynamic. You know what I'm saying?
So here's the thing:
mother sister wife. You know what I'm saying? Like,
what? No, what the fuck are you talking about?
Despite what it sounds like, this is actually a really weird affair. Because it's spiritual incest is the thing they are concerned with here.
Yes, damn. I made the cardinal sin of turning 90 degrees to my left, and I have.
And now we're talking about spiritual incest and right back to the mic.
Fuck you.
The situation...
You think I will not respond?
The situation was that because these two families, her family, the Zenkovas, and the Kibalchiches, they are like close family friends. Nikolai's godfather, that he like whenever he's baptized, that's Katya's dad, is his godfather. So like the priests are all like no, like you can't, like you're spiritually family with her. And another thing is that before Nikolai returned home to Ukraine to actually marry Katya, she had a suitor to deal with, a local vicar, Father Serapion, who everyone called Scorpion as like a little pun. He tried to arrange a marriage between her and his nephew. And then Katya's father, knowing that she was going to marry Nikolai, he lied to the vicar and said she was, too young. He has to wait a few years. And then, just a couple of months later, the couple, they have to get a ruling on whether their marriage can go forward, and they have to send it to the church. And the vicar whose desk that it lands on is Serapion, who is incredibly pissed about all of this. And while their actual blood connection was like next to nothing, it was incredibly distant, he still manages to like destroy their entire marriage by basically landing on the spiritual incest thing, and saying, quote, "The blood relation is not of sufficient degree to hinder the marriage of Ekaterina Zenkova and Nikolai Kibalchich, but the spiritual relationship, which was hidden by the petitioners, does not allow the marriage. The marriage permission must be denied." So they can do normal incest.
Like the baptismal father in this context is just that he is the one who like baptized him as a kid.
Yeah, that is enough to destroy their marriage. And in fairness, a big part of that is because Vicar Serapion, like, it's not an actual good argument. It's just because Vicar Serapion wants to marry his nephew to Katya instead. So yeah, not getting married because they are spiritually God brother and sister.
Because
Brother, aren't we all God's brothers and sisters?
What does a spiritual? I'm trying to picture what a spiritual birth defect is. Like
Oh, buddy, just look at my life. Spend 5 minutes with me and you'll know.
Getting born with an extra like little ingrown soul.
Yeah, I was born missing a chakra.
Yeah, like I've got all of the other ones. I'm just missing one of them near the middle. Wandering chakra sounds like it could be a really fun disease in a D&D campaign. Now, true to their characters, Katya suggested that they just like, hey, let's just go to the next town. Let's find a vicar who doesn't hate us. Or they could just rebaptize. You know, like there are ways around this. They can still get married. Nikolai, though, he always hates church stuff. He doesn't want to deal with any of this church stuff anymore. So he pulls a fedora atheist on her and just shouts that there's no God and then leaves to go back to school.
That's one way of doing it.
So yeah.
So he's kind of like, so she was into trying to make it work.
Yes.
But he's really like sins of the fathering her.
Kind of, yeah. Like he still wants to marry her. Also, this will be the second last time he ever sees her in his life. Cool. It is kind of like at this point, like how much does he love her that like he's not willing to do even the slightest bit of work to like try and get around this problem. He's not lazy. Like he does have the energy to solve problems. He's just not applying it right now. Like his at this point, his love and his life, like he has told Katya to her face, like, I'm going to give my life for the revolution to the person who wants to like grow old with him.
Sorry, bitch. My true love is the revolution.
You know how I ride.
It's also noted that whenever he becomes a revolutionary, he has like a really dumb hat. It's like a really dumb like beaver skin hat that he just wears for some reason, and everyone's
Wait,
just like,
are you telling me he has his own like shitty style?
Yeah. He has the proto fedora, which for him is this like incredibly shabby hat that like everyone in the revolution cell is just like, why the fuck is he wearing that hat?
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, me personally, I would not be caught dead wearing a silly outfit.
No. Whenever they're getting hunted, like there are sketches of them going around, and I fully imagine that everyone else is just their face. And for Nikolai, it's just like, have you seen this hat?
Have you
seen an ugly hat recently?
Have you ever dreamt this man?
So I'm not talking about him, but how many people have been just like killed by Russian Secret Service with that hat?
Just fully executing anyone found with that hat.
They're just you're just walking down the street, and then one day you got fucking sneezed in the back of the head with a Makarov.
The arrest.
When Nikolai Kibalchich returned to his apartment, he found the secret police searching it. Fearing that they would hunt down his friends as well, Nikolai actually turned himself in and was immediately arrested. At first, he thought the police had tailed a friend who was supposed to drop off a load of illegal pamphlets at his apartment, but it turns out they were actually tipped off by his uncle back in Ukraine. Basically, what happened was his uncle, a priest, noticed that all of the peasants suddenly seemed to know a lot of big words and didn't like the Tsar anymore, and he immediately figured that his nephew was to blame for this, and he got him arrested in St. Petersburg.
Damn, that guy sucks.
Oh yeah. This being Imperial Russia in the 1870s, he was tortured for information on the rest of the black market library network, but also like he did not crack at any point. He also maintained that the books and pamphlets were just for his own light reading, even though the secret police found more than 700 copies of one newsletter in his room. And he was just like, no, that's mine. I
like to reread things.
I have several hundred copies of edition 1. What do you want? Like, I'm waiting till after the revolution, then these things are going to be worth a packet. So yeah, they didn't believe him.
What kind of torture techniques they got going on in Imperial Russia in the 1870s? Did it say?
It did say. And we don't know for certain if this one was used on him, but the book does talk about, I'm blanking on the name, but basically, you know the James Bond chair?
Oh yeah, the ball smacking chair.
Yeah, it's like that, except combine that with like a drop tank kind of thing. Like you sit on the chair, and then the bottom drops out into like a trap door, and then a bunch of dudes are on the floor below with like whips, and they just whip the shit out of you. And that was a torture
so we
method
have the
that was
James
used.
Bond nutsack chair?
Yeah, but it also drops you, and then a bunch of like Okrana guys beat the shit out of your balls.
Wait, are they the tank below you, whipping you from below, or you're dropped into a tank of what?
This is a 2-floor scenario. Like you.
So you're telling me you're just down at the bottom floor, pissed off, and then out of nowhere, you're presented with a nutsack and just told to go wild.
Oh yeah. Like if you're the Okrana guy working in the fucking basement, if you're working night shift in the basement, you're just wandering around, and then someone's leg and ass drops down from the ceiling, and your job is to just reflexively whip the shit out of it.
Okay, so you're dropped in a way that you're suspended, and you're just half hanging through the floor.
Yeah, like from what I found, you're strapped to the chair by like your shoulders and whatnot. So then when the chair drops out from under you, you're still dangling there, and then someone just like stubs out a cigarette on your foot or something.
Or your balls.
That too. Now, because his crime had happened in Ukraine, he was sent back there for the trial to the Lukyanovsky holding facility in Ukraine. When he got there, he was tortured again, as though the first round of torture hadn't even happened. They just wanted to know the same shit.
Oh, boy.
And I guess it was easier to torture to like, this is before the telegram and whatnot. This is just how information gets around. You just tell it to a guy, and he goes to another place, and then they torture it out of him. That's just how like messengers worked back then. So they also told Nikolai that his case, like he gets to Kyiv, and they say that they are going to like try him there, and he gets there, and then he is told that actually they're going to do some administrative stuff in St. Petersburg, and once that is done, they can try him. For context, this is happening at the end of 1875. It will be 2 years of him sitting in this jail in Kyiv before they're done like doing their little administrative like stamp checking, and they are actually ready to try him.
The administrative gritty.
He will be stuck in jail that entire time. And like, as a bit of a spoiler, he's going to get 1 month in prison, like actually tried at the end of all this.
No, wait, are we including, what he's already spent in jail as, time served during?
Nuh-uh.
He doesn't get credited his jail time. He has to go and then ultimately serve an extra month.
Yeah. He gets 1 month after all of this.
This just kind of reinforces the theory he's getting thrown in there on purpose, because he's going up like, oh, I hate it if you captured me. But then by the time he actually gets to trial, they're like, as soon as he
gets out of school, there's no longer a dungeon, so you have to go to the cops to get your dungeon.
I mean, low key, I knew we'd be getting really stupid off the rip with this, but I didn't expect this level of stupid.
And you can also see a lot of through lines today, because putting him in prison for a very long time for literally no reason, it doesn't make him more law-abiding, It actually just radicalizes him into being pretty much a terrorist.
Are you telling him they put him into a radicalization chamber with other people that would probably push him further forwards?
Not to mention, whenever he goes into this jail, he actually starts meeting, up till now, his revolutionary activity has been hanging out with other students who also are, not good at revolution.
Are you telling me that they, changed some, book-toting ideologue into a gun-toting ideologue?
He meets, the fucking A-team of socialist revolutionaries. He actually winds up simping for a couple of them.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting character.
So dude just gets the fucking masterclass, and hey, do you really want to get down with some shit?
Well, thankfully for the powers that be, I mean, this is an outlier and the only time anyone's ever been radicalized and made connections in prison.
Yeah, right?
And while he was great at resisting torture and protecting his friends, Nikolai's lies to cover his own ass were pretty pathetic. Confronted with witnesses, including his own uncle, his defense of himself pretty much boiled down to, if I wanted to do illegal stuff, I wouldn't have got caught.
If I had come to the village with the goal of spreading propaganda, I would, of course, have passed out to the peasants not just one written tale, but hundreds of them. I would have given them to the people with whom I was better acquainted, and I wouldn't have left these works with them permanently either, so as to not leave evidence in their hands.
So yeah, his entire defense just boils down to, I got caught, which means I wasn't trying to do illegal shit on purpose. You know, like laying out my master plan of how I would have gotten away with it while I'm already in jail.
The classical like narcissists on trial testifying for themselves on the stand. Well, you know, if I was guilty, I just wouldn't have been caught. So like, it wasn't me.
I'm picturing him saying this while he's wearing his stupid little hat, while he's hooked up, like someone below, boss, we have been whipping his balls for hours and he won't shut up.
Did you take his hat off when you did it?
Actually, that's an improper technique to whip my balls. Now, as you can imagine, this whole period was very traumatic and radicalizing for Nikolai. His career and education prospects were gone, his marriage was banned, and he'd been left to rot in prison either by the system's malice or by the system being so dysfunctional that it had actually just lost his file. Also, throughout this period, like he was sending notes. He was asking like, hey, can we like try me for crimes already? And every single time they would send him back like, all right, now we've sent it to this guy. Now we've sent it to this guy. Now we've sent it to this guy. And it's just bouncing around like the bureaucracy of St. Petersburg.
We really haven't determined that you have committed a crime, but we're trying to find out.
So Nikolai Kibalchich was already an accomplished socialist and propagandist. Practically everywhere he went, he either fought for the oppressed or like immediately started giving out banned literature. Ironically, if he'd been charged right away and sentenced to a month, he'd likely have just gone back to school and handing out pamphlets. Instead, being in prison put him in direct contact with real revolutionaries and self-proclaimed terrorists dedicated to overthrowing or killing the Tsar. Nikolai was eager to join. Among these revolutionaries were 3 prisoners who had tried to start a peasants' revolt in Ukraine. And it's actually kind of funny how they did this, funny and horrible. The peasants were all like die-hard Tsarists, so these guys were just like, yeah, we're from the Tsar. We are the official commissars of the Tsar. You have to fight for us. And the reason we're doing this revolution is to free the Tsar from his horrible minders. And this somewhat worked. So these guys are Yakov Stefanovich, Lev Daish, and Ivan Bokanivsky. They were members of a secret group called Land and Liberty, which was a sort of umbrella organization for various revolutionary groups and sects. Because there's a lot of them and they don't necessarily like each other.
Just you guys, you're in the same fucking ballpark.
There are a lot of things that are, true then, true now. Leftist groups not getting along is probably the biggest true then, true now.
Are you saying you just get to start taking off, boxes on the leftist infighting card?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this will get worse later. So Nikolai fell in with the group, and when they learned, like at first they thought he was just a weirdo, like just some politically motivated kid, but then they found out that he knew how to make nitroglycerin out of basically toilet wine.
So this man could just fucking bada bing, bada boom, I'll destroy your shit.
He's able to just kind of like have explosives on him at all time, and they realize how huge of an asset this is.
I mean, I feel like just thinking about, those Soviet conscripts drinking the boot polish and jet fuel as the alcohol. I'm kind of wondering how far off their wine was from nitroglycerin to begin with.
All right, now sit very still.
Just wiping boot polish onto bread and just letting it dry out naturally and eating that to get high.
So he joins in with this revolutionary group. And there's still nothing they can really do from a local jail in Kyiv. And from their perspective, they get sent to jail. Land and Liberty, their like resistance buddies, they have actually organized to break these 3 dudes out. They have gotten a guy a job as a guard, and he's going to let them out at some point. And then when they get there, They find this weird dude, this weird doctor engineer guy who really hates God, and for some reason the guards let him keep his fedora.
That's the first ever interaction they have. Yo, this guy who's right up your alley, he hates God, he's got a hat.
Like, what are you in for? I don't know yet. Nikolai spends 30 months in this jail waiting for trial and then gets 1 month after. But yeah, they realize how much of an asset he is, and they frankly feel sorry for him. And they realize that they can actually get him out earlier. They can get him to the resistance movement, and they want to do this earlier because he's an explosives expert, and he's going to like bring a bunch of new, effectively like capabilities to their organization. They can pay bail for him because he's like done a relatively small crime.
What, denying God back in the day?
But the problem is that only his family, like his actual family, they can't afford the bond. It's like 500 rubles, and they're like dirt poor priests in a random Ukrainian town. And the law says that the only people who can pay his bond are his family. So the way they try and do this is Land and Liberty, this resistance movement, is just like, hey, do you want to like get married to this lady and then we'll pay your bond and then you'll be free?
Please tell me he says no for a stupid reason.
He says yes, he's down for this. The problem is that this also gets sent to the clergy, and it gets sent to Mr. Scorpion. It gets sent to Vicar Scorpion, who shoots them down again.
Okay, no, back up. Where's the spiritual incest this time around? They're not even from the same fucking village.
Oh, the best part is that while he's in prison, one of the things that radicalizes him even further is that he reads, like, spiritual incest is not a thing for the nobles. Like, the nobles are, like, marrying each other's cousins all the time.
Yeah, cousin, sister, wife.
He reads this and he gets pissed off, and I don't have it here, but there's basically a quote like that boils down to like, oh, they can do incest, but I can't. We need to overthrow the state. We need to make sure that everyone can do incest.
Good fucking God.
Your sister, our sister.
I was on board with home slice here,
just the weirdest reason to join the October Revolution is being promised. Like, no, we will all get to bang our sisters.
I've been on board for him, but just hitting us with a fucking cousin, sister, wife, real just Arkansas tussle.
The opiate of the masses. Religion exists to keep us away from to keep us distracted and away from what we all truly want. Brackets, our cousin sister.
Mm-hmm.
He's a complicated man, and he's going to take out his sexual frustration with explosives. So in the end, in 1878, after 30 months in jail, Nikolai Kibalchich was transferred to the famous Kresty prison in St. Petersburg.
Oh, and those Simpsons kids thought they had a bad time at Camp Kresty.
Yeah, he's doing great.
I guess it makes sense for him to be sent there as a clown, right?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, like you find out that the Kibalchiches either become prison clowns or priests.
Welcome to Camp Kresty.
There, he was tried and sentenced to a month in prison for the crime of handing out pamphlets 3 years ago. Like in Kiev, the experience further radicalized him, and it also let him rub elbows with literally, this is where the best revolutionaries go, this prison. They are the best, they're the A team. I know I said it before, about the place in Kiev where he met those three dudes.
They really put him in contact with the best of the best.
Oh yeah. This is this man knows how to network, and how to network is to get sent to maximum prison.
That's what I was gonna fucking bridge us into. This is literally his networking tour.
Yeah, I mean, I joked about it, but isn't that exactly what happened with Irish prisoners in the UK?
Yeah, during what's it called, the Troubles. How all of the top tier prisons just turn into IRA training camps because, hey, yo, you got, thrown into prison for fuck all. You want to join the cause?
This prison, nicknamed the Crosses for its shape, was home to about 300 other political prisoners, most of them held for anti-state activities. For example, the famous revolutionary Ekaterina Breshkovskaya was held at the prison, and Nikolai, being a colossal simp, sent her a letter talking about how big a fan he was of her work. Quote, she had never heard of him and made inquiries. Her friends told her he was a well-meaning youth but of no importance. She answered him and a correspondence started. His letters were passed around to the other girls and became a standing joke. They served as comic relief from the rigors of prison. Breshkovskaya kept the correspondence up so as to not hurt his feelings.
Damn, bro.
I have to interject. I bet she felt really fucking foolish considering
My
what's
lady.
to come.
I feel like her friends are a lot like the friends in Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy, you know, like they have a problem with his baggy clothes kind of thing, but in Russia.
But it's just his hat.
Yeah, they had a problem with
no one has
stupid
dared
hat.
remove his dumb hat from
Yeah,
him.
so
yet.
he has his prison clothes on, but the hat is still firmly attached to his head.
He has yet to learn to shed his hat. You're right.
And yeah, just like him immediately finding the coolest revolutionary and just sending like shitloads of fawning letters to her. At the same time, though, Ekaterina also noticed, like over his 1 month at this prison, his rhetoric becomes increasingly violent. As a reminder, up to this point, Nikolai has always resisted the state through pamphlets and educating peasants. But in his letters to Ekaterina, he fully translated his habit of standing up against injustice to a hatred of the Tsar and Russia's autocratic government. Like he has I hope I have done a good enough job of like writing and explaining this, his path of radicalization, like the steps that get him there.
From punching cops in the face as a 9-year-old to writing death threats to the Tsar in his adulthood.
Oh yeah. Like a direct through line, and the fact that, yeah, like he probably wouldn't have gotten to this point if it weren't for the fact, how to put this?
He wouldn't have gotten to this point if he wasn't constantly thrown into a dungeon as a child.
Yes, and some of that is his fault, but like this latest one,
Unironically, if the Russian prison system had been just more efficient, he wouldn't have come to
Somewhat
contact
effective?
with her.
he spent 969 days total, 969 in various jails for a crime
for a
worthy of a
month.
month. Yes. He had gone in a med student who handed out propaganda leaflets, and he came out a dedicated revolutionary who knew how to make explosives.
Like, there were dozens of fucking off tracks for this, but just none of them were taken.
Like, as soon as he gets out, he joins the resistance in St. Petersburg. And you're just like in the safe house, the door opens, and you see like the shadow cast on the
shitty
floor, and
hat.
it's just the shitty hat. Someone's putting up the bat signal, but it's just for his like weird shitty hat.
This just feels like the profiled by the FBI for terrorism crimes and being turned into like an actual Al-Qaeda operative.
Oh yeah, like the entrapment kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, the Okhrana gave him that hat knowing what it would make him.
I had no just, influence on this. I just, was an enthusiast of this hat. And then now just know the Tsar needs to die.
People's will.
Now, a lot of the time, this period is depicted as like one small resistance cell coming up with one assassination plan and pulling it off somewhat cleanly. That is not how Land and Liberty operated. First off, there was no main group, just a lot of small cells, a lot of them with very different plans and ideas of how to resist the Tsar. For example, one of Nikolai's old school buddies joined a group called the Troglodytes and took part in the assassination of General Mezentsov. This guy, he is the head of the secret police. This is the guy who, a couple of years earlier, Professor Zeon sicked this guy on his students and they blackbagged a bunch of kids. One of those school buddies, one of those exact same guys who went to that school, stabs him to death in the middle of broad daylight in St. Petersburg. Another guy, a doctor Nikolai had studied with, he immediately tries to kill Mezentsov's replacement. So they are taking, this is fully a war. St. Petersburg in 1878 was buzzing with political assassinations and government crackdowns. There's full on, I have a note of this in the other section, but it is at this time, if you join a resistance cell, your lifespan is about 100 days. That is how long you are expected to last before you are captured or killed. And there's kind of similar amounts going for the secret police. These guys are murdering each other in the alleys. This actually got bad enough that the Tsar banned any former political prisoners from living in the city, which didn't actually do anything to stop them. It just meant that they all now had to get fake names, which does kind of make me wonder why any of them were living under their normal identities, but oh well.
Buzzing with political assassinations is a really delightful and evocative phrase. It's almost like it's a viral trend going around. It's the Stab a Public Servant Challenge 2020 or 1878.
Whenever I was writing it, I meant it more like a kicking a hornet's nest kind of thing. But yeah, that does the buzz today. Get out there and kill an Okhrana guy.
It's the hot new fad hitting the streets in your city.
killing a guy by inviting him on my podcast, getting him in the studio, and then revealing that I know that he's the head of the secret police, and then stabbing him repeatedly on camera.
Have your teens been texting about murdering the secret police?
Learn with these code phrases.
Now, Nikolai himself fell in with a new resistance cell called Battle Group. He turned his apartment into an explosives factory and led 2 other chemists as they churned out bombs for Battle Group assassins. Now, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on this period since, like, through all of these attempts and, like, there's this internal group politics, Nikolai Kibalchich was mostly stuck in the apartment. He wasn't a great leader, he wasn't particularly charismatic, and compared to the group's seasoned assassins, like, they have guys who, they have ace assassins. He was really no help in planning operations. What he was good at was sitting in the apartment, building bombs, and they'd even got to the point where, like, people would give him custom orders, like, hey, we're going to do this job. Can you make us a custom bomb? And he would design something and have it all worked up for them.
Ties all his bombs into a different shape for each one. It's like you get a bomb shaped like a dog, and you get a bomb shaped like a sword. And...
He's a clown, so he makes balloon animal bombs. Yeah.
There he is!
Just replacing the Tsar's dog with a very large dog-shaped bomb and hoping he doesn't notice. So, yeah, like, he's not an active participant in the terrorism, but his work did give Battle Group powerful new weapons and ways of striking politicians. Before Nikolai, assassinations were done, like, with knives and guns, which, even if it was successful, it almost always meant that the assassin got captured or killed right away. Like, several times, people will run up to officials. The secret police general, his replacement, what happens there, like, that assassination attempt fails because the guy runs up, fires a bunch of shots at point-blank range, misses every single one, and then gets tackled. And while they do have some, like, professional assassins, some guys who are good at their job, a lot of these dudes, like, the average age in these resistance cells is, like, 21. It's not they have a huge attrition rate, and none of these guys know how to shoot guns good. As the missions evolved, Nikolai graduated to building bombs with, like, he'd have timers on them or electrical triggers. He fully developed a roadside bombs, IEDs, where you could plant them early, have a spotter set up with a detonator, and just wait for the target to wander by.
Oh, that's some modern day shit.
This is like a quantum leap compared to what these kids are doing before he shows up. They suddenly turn into, like, peak of the Taliban levels of effectiveness.
Yeah, this is unironically some real shit.
So before that, they'd only been getting the assassinations done with knives and guns. Like, they didn't even get one person before with, like, a nice square pie to the face.
Assassinating the Tsar with a pie bomb.
a nitroglycerin souffle kind of thing, yeah.
Oh no, these aren't homemade. They're made in a factory. A bomb factory. They're bombs.
So in all seriousness, like, because when it talks about building the bombs with timers here, like, this is exactly where the overlap comes in with the series that I did. And the author of that book, who, I also had reservations about, we thought they were kind of generous in suggesting that, like, the protagonist of that story, a bit of a spoiler, like, getting clockwork bombs built, which really hadn't been done before, that surely, like, this had inspired groups specifically such as Narodnaya Volia here. And I was curious if there was anything that came up in the story as to whether they had looked at this other terrorism that had been happening in really only like 4, 5, 6 years earlier, or whether they just kind of came up with the idea independently to, like, hey, we have clockwork mechanisms that are pretty good and dynamite is pretty cool, so, like, can we mix them? Like, did they kind of come up with that themselves?
Do you mean if these guys were motivated by previous, or if it was the other way around, if this motivated or inspired? Because I will say Nikolai has much too big of an ego to take inspiration from anyone. So, like, first off, like, as his bombs are kind of making their way around, some of them fail and the cops investigate them, and every single time, like, it's well noted, the chemists are just like, this is basically the Breaking Bad meth of dynamite. These guys are just like, this is the most pure TNT I have ever seen in my life. This, like, Alfred Nobel could not have done this better.
Like, I think what it is it might be a bit of like a, like how it was, Isaac Newton and somebody else who had almost like concurrently invented calculus at about the same time.
Oh, okay. Possibly.
And with the timelines here, it almost seems like that is what is happening, where especially, like, he's already building bombs by 1879,
yes.
and, like, he essentially if anyone is being killed with him, he's basically the second person to kill somebody with a dynamite time bomb. Yeah, like if I had to come up with a theory here, it's that he was basically just worked this out on his own in a very, very similar time frame, but later than the subject of our story.
Okay.
Of the story that I did.
Right. Another thing is he very well could have read about it. Like one of his big things, he's learning about bombs. He's self-educating, which is something he's had to do his whole life. He's going out, he's finding these books. It's a minor bit of a spoiler, but like whenever he's on trial, whenever he gets captured and someone says like, oh, he was probably financed by like these foreign intelligence agencies or something, he has an ego meltdown and starts telling them like, no, I designed this. And he even gives them like an MLA citation. It's like, where did I learn how to make that bomb? Russian Artillery Manual, 1876, page 32. And he's just like rattling off everything he knows purely because his ego was like bruised slightly.
Oh, okay.
Now, in 1879, the Land and Liberty organization kind of broke down. It was always split into what they called the villagist and political factions. So what this was the villagists were the people who believed that the revolution would come from the peasant classes, and they didn't approve of targeted assassinations of nobles. They wanted to like do a popular uprising, and then we will beat them in either military or through, reason. Meanwhile, the political faction, they believed that the best way to topple the government was to kill the Tsar and then kill anyone who worked for him. In this, there was a lot of classism, obviously. And a lot of the politicals, they didn't really believe in the peasants. They didn't believe in the serf class. There were a lot of guys who were like, no, it's only going to be the workers who are going to do this. So these had always been issues, but in 1879, they kind of become like irreconcilable. And the political factions that Nikolai is part of, they split off and they formed something called the People's Will, Narodnaya Volya. And at this point, they even issue flyers. They put out flyers and they put them out in the streets, out in the open, where they sentence Tsar Alexander II to death. For the next 2 years, the bombs made by Nikolai Kibalchich were the People's Will's trademark assassination weapon. In 1879, and some of these are actually kind of fun, in 1879, the group tried and failed to blow up the Tsar's train with a mine buried under the tracks. Unfortunately for them, they were expecting the Tsar's train to be the second in a convoy, and they didn't know that he had actually impatiently switched the order. So when the second train came by and they detonated it under the proper car, it just sprayed fruit and marmalade everywhere.
Oh, that rules.
They'd blown up a car loaded with fruit for the Tsar's palace.
Well, damn, sucks to suck.
They had like his train and they had the support train, and it was supposed to be the support train first, but then the engine broke down and the Tsar was impatient, so he just sent his train on ahead. So from the assassin's point of view, one train goes by and then like 2 hours later, the second train shows up. They set it off perfectly. It detonates the correct car. It just happened to be the car loaded with fruit.
Oh, that makes sense. I was going to say a similar thing happened to the FLQ, but no, they more so, I think, just fucked up.
Yeah. In 1880, they managed to bury a massive bomb underneath the Tsar's palace. Like, this is the Tsar's palace in the middle of St. Petersburg. They tunnel under there. They fill it with explosives right under the dining hall. They are going to blow up the Tsar while he's holding a feast. Now, this also failed. The blast leveled much of the palace and it killed 11 guards, but it actually left the Tsar and his guests intact.
Like, it was just the precise opposite part of the room?
I actually don't know.
They needed more TNT. That's what the solution
No,
to their
that's the
problem
mental
was.
image I have. They're just sitting at one part of the table. They're just chowing down. The other half of the table just gets fucking obliterated.
They just need to keep their chin up and keep trying because, like, Narodnaya Volya only needs to be lucky once, and the Tsar needs to be lucky every time, so.
Well, the issue there is that the People's Will, they cannot be, like, they're not the only players in this. They are up against the Okhrana. And all through this period, every time they fail an assassination attempt, there's a new round of, like, the Okhrana gets, like, more power. They get more ability, they get more, like, leeway to go after the People's Will. And all through this period, the leadership of the People's Will, they were being slowly eaten away. Like, they had no shortage of new recruits. There's a lot of disaffected young people who are willing to die for the cause. But by this time, by 1879, 1880, all of the experienced people are either dead or in jail. At 26, Nikolai was actually the second oldest person left in the organization.
Oh, shit.
Everyone else is like 20 and has no idea what they're doing. And Nikolai, again, is not a leader. He's just a bomb guy. So what the situation kind of is like, it's unless they get the Tsar, it seems likely that the Okhrana is going to win the attrition war. Like, the Okhrana can keep just arresting their guys, putting them in jail, turning them, torturing them. And as that happens, the people's will is going to get less effective.
As long as the Tsar stays alive, they just don't have anything.
Yeah. And the experienced people get caught and the inexperienced people get to lead it. So they're kind of bleeding. They're dying a death of 1,000 cuts, and they decide, with their organization being chipped away and their ability to strike at the Tsar crumbling, the people's will, they needed to, like, take him out. They needed one final plan. And that, listener, is where we are going to cap off part 1 of our series on Nikolai Kibalchich, the rocket visionary who blew up the Tsar. If you're wondering where the space stuff comes in, don't worry, it does come in part 2.
Do we get up to some Hitman kinds of bullshit? Just, hey, Tsar, look at this new rocket. And then just tilt it right at his face?
It does kind of get there.
Yeah.
The Tsar, in his final hours, does not make a lot of intelligent decisions.
I'm shocked.
Arguably, the last decision he makes is, like, truly, like, I'm reading it and I'm just like, that. Why would anyone do that?
I was going to say, color me surprised for a man of his station that he makes stupid decisions in his twilight years.
His twilight hour.
Yeah, it's really this, with this cliffhanger here, this is quite the lurch we've left Nikolai in, because, I don't know, I'm just kind of picturing him, like you say, the rest of his organization is falling away from him.
Failed after failed assassination.
I just kind of picture him having to, like, juggle increasing roles here, right? And people would just keep handing him things and he's got to keep them all up in the air and, like...
But yeah, listener, thank you for listening to part 1 of this series. We hope you come back for part 2, the explosive finale, but Tish, I'm hilarious. And Kelly, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fucking great. I mean, honestly, I secretly kind of hate space disasters, so this was the perfect topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this was so much fun, and I'm excited to see how it ends.
You got to cut it with killing a Tsar, so you just have a kind of... you have a nice intersection.
I'm going to hit myself on the head with a hammer so I forget how the story ends, and it will all be a surprise to me.
I guarantee you that, like, Wikipedia reading would give you enough to, like, you'd have the basics, but then the details are so much dumber. It's so... I love reading stories, because every time I read one, it's just like, what I thought was smart was actually just everyone being stupid.
Please, plug your shit.
It's going to be much easier to plug now, because everything, by the time this is out, everything will be properly rebranded, so you can find the podcast now under Canuck as a Slur. It's a podcast largely about just very specific, interesting, weird, obscure pieces of Canadian culture and history. And we've got, if you're excited for I assume it's going to be coming out like in 1 or 2 weeks, part 2 to this, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is a perfect time to go listen to our series on William King Thomas. That's episodes 5.1 through 5.4. And really, like, leads very well into this story. So check that out if you get a chance. And you can find us by typing Canuck as a Slur either into YouTube or into your podcast app. The YouTube versions tend to have slides and video that you can watch along, but it's not required. You can also listen to the audio version. And Quinn will be kind enough to drop our link tree into the description here, and then you can check out all our socials as well and join our Discord and our Patreon. I should really pitch this, because I am now, by the time you're hearing this, I'm definitely have stopped working at all my jobs, and the show is hopefully going to be the thing that supports me. So if you can throw in a few bucks if you can spare a few bucks to help me live the dream, hop on our Patreon. And if you can't spare a few bucks, then just pull your money out of the FTL Patreon and put it into mine, and then everything's kind of even that way.
Yes. But yeah, audience, that has been Failure to Launch. Goodbye.
Adios.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show, and a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are August Sun, Boss, Charlie, Daniel F, David R, Ellie M, Jorg 2, Hippity Hoppity, This Asteroid Is Now My Property, Luke Nukem, Lupe G, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Nerd Beast, Noah, Oil Drum, Pat, Space Northpaw, Spectre Cohen, Tactical Sport, Tortilla Baron, and Vivek D. Our space dogs are a Union Thug, At Guy is Best Guy, Adam H., Angry Old Man Yada Yada, Anthony C., Otto Fox, Band User, Baron M., Ben L., Boomzilla, Brent D., Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles G., Cole C., Captain Lag, CSD 2016, Daddy Bongo, Double Time, Dr. Shockmaster, Hank, Aaron, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Ian W., Emmanuel L., JM M., James A., James C., Jamie K., John C., Johntastic 20x6, Kara Chameleon, Kate D., Corbin the Dog, Korolev's Condiment, Lane of the Wired, Lens Wipe, M., McLean C., Mar, Nick S., Norman W., Panda, Randall, Sam A., Sean F., Sean H., Sensual Kazoo, Sean P., Sophie L., Sparks, Spirit of Thunder, That Big Sexy, The Best Sean, Tom M., Tim P., Trash Do, Barosh T., Brisk, Will W., Wingsmith, Zap, and Zim. Albert Count, 103. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danner.